All right, so we talked about a leader for the walk around process, which again, I think should be your team leader, but this should be something you think about. The compliance officers, if they're there for a specific complaint, you should go directly to the location of the complaint and directly back. This is not some public relations tour of your job site, okay? This is a compliance inspection, and if they're there and they say that we have a complaint that you know, people aren't tied off on the 4th floor, then you should go directly to the 4th floor where people are working at the edge and observe the fall protection in that area. If you have a complaint about, you know, Sanitoys or something else, the complaint will be pretty specific. That is where you go and that is what you observe. Don't say, well, let's take a tour. Let me show you what we're building here, or expand the scope of the inspection for them, okay? If they're there just to do a general safety and health inspection, they're going to give you the parameters. If they call it a wall-to-wall, that means they want to look at everything. They want to look at all your documentation. They're going to ask for it, produce what they ask for. They want to see your job site. Then you should think, okay, what's the best way we should view the job site? I normally start like at the top of the building and work my way down, and I usually go in a circular fashion. That's a good method. That's a good practice and process, and then that lets the rest of my team know where they can expect to see me showing up, and that you know, lets me kind of plan what my route's going to be so I'm not all over the place, okay? So again, understand that plain view doctrine. Have a route that you're going to walk through, and understand that wherever you walk, whatever's in plain view can expand the scope of the inspection, okay? Don't be deceitful, you know, walk through the whole job site, make sure you're, you know, I usually tell the compliance officer, okay, well, normally I would start at the top and we'll just go in a, you know, a circular fashion through every floor. And I might tell them there's really not any work taking place on floors 3 through 7. We can definitely walk those if you'd like to, but most of our work is on floor number 14. I'm just making something up, right? And, you know, communicate with the compliance officer and, you know, make sure that they have no issues with, they know what your process is, they know what the plan is, they know where you're going to be going, okay? You should plan the most direct route to an inspection area if it's a complaint, and you should, like I said, avoid providing the full tour of the facility if that's not what they're there for. This is important also, thinking about how people get onto your site. If my compliance officer shows up at the front gate, but my office trailer is at the back corner of the project site, now they have to work their way through and try and find the office. And anything they see from point A to point B is again subject to plain view doctrine. So folks should be trained on, you know, if you see someone who's a visitor, you should approach them. If they identify themselves as a compliance officer, you should immediately notify the safety manager or the superintendent or the project manager, whoever it is, and you personally escort them directly to the office. Even if you're a laborer and you were, you know, doing another job, if you approach them, don't just say, oh, the office is over there, and point to it. Make sure that your team understands that person on your site is to be escorted at all times, okay? Take them to a location where, if OSHA showed up today, where would you have an opening and closing conference? I tend to have opening and closing conferences, number one, where I have enough space for everybody, which could limit your choices. I tend to like them to be in an office if I can. And I tend to like them to be in an area that, you know, we're not standing there watching every single thing that's going on the job site while we're waiting to conduct our opening conference. Okay, so be strategic about where you can do that. And also you may choose to have a location where, I've had some compliance officers say that at, you know, the end of the day, about an hour before the end of the day, here's the employees that they want to talk to. And these are people that, you know, they saw or got their information as they were walking around. And, you know, they want 15 minutes per person. And here's a side conference room or an office that you can use privately where they can conduct employee interviews. So those are things that should be worked out in your opening conference. So some preliminary inspection issues, we're there to protect our employer's interests. So when the compliance officer arrives, we notify our inspection team per our plan that we've developed in advance. If your team leader's not available, again, the compliance officer will normally wait about an hour to an hour and a half for management to arrive, but they don't have to. So you should be prepared to have alternates or stand-ins until your safety director or whomever it is can arrive. Again, understand and exercise your rights to have representation during the inspection. Here's two really great documents that you can use as a reference: the Field Operations Manual or the Field Inspection Reference Manual for the state of Hawaii. If you're a safety professional, you should have a copy of these documents and you should understand exactly what the process is and how it's supposed to be followed. So we have to follow rules and regulations, and OSHA has processes and procedures that they should be following too. Considerations for a warrant. I already mentioned that this is not something that we want to take haphazardly. This is a very important decision, and you should consider very deeply and fully understand the consequences and benefits of whether you're going to ask for a warrant or not. I mentioned earlier that OSHA needs consent to conduct an inspection on our sites. If OSHA is showing up and they have really no clear probable cause, like there was no complaint, there wasn't an accident or a referral, or it's not part of a special inspection program, then you should be seeking additional information to understand and determine what is your probable cause to conduct this inspection. You may need additional time before an inspection takes place or before an investigation. Be really careful because, again, it doesn't take as long as people think for these warrants to be obtained. They're already kind of pre-written, and the compliance officer will call over to their manager. They'll call over to the solicitor, get a warrant, and have it back in their hand lickety-split, okay? If OSHA is unwilling to negotiate a reasonable scope and conditions for the inspection, that might be a condition that you make a warrant consideration, but do not do so without legal counsel, or a different way to say that is only do so with legal counsel, okay? So the consent to inspect, normally we waive our right to a warrant and we give consent for an inspection. But we should understand what's the scope and the conditions of the inspection, and that should occur at the opening conference. They should tell us, you know, what they're there for, what they want to look at, what kind of recordings or information or evidence they're going to gather. Like normally if I'm at the opening conference, I'll ask if they're going to be doing any video recording, or if they're not video recording, I'll make sure, are you going to audio record only? I've had compliance officers have their video recorder on, but they're recording audio, and so everything that gets said during the inspection is recorded. So those are things that you should have agreement on before the inspection takes place, okay? That's scope and conditions. Who's going to take pictures? What evidence are you going to gather? Be careful. I'd like to say that there's never retaliation, but if you request a warrant, you know, OSHA's going to come back and be like, something's up over here. We're going to look a lot closer, right? You also don't want to signal OSHA, hey, there's something here we're trying to hide. And hopefully you're not trying to hide something, right? You don't want to lose control over the inspection scope. If you ask for a warrant, you lose control over that scope. You want to be, you know, firm, fair, and cooperative. That's important. You get more flies with honey than vinegar. That being said, sometimes people take that honey to an extreme. The compliance officers to do a job. They're nice people. In fact, many of the compliance officers we have here, I consider friends or acquaintances that I've known a long time, but they're there to do a job just like I am, and I need to respect that, and I want them to respect my job too, right? So be cooperative, be professional. Don't try and make it into a, you know, hey friend, I'm going to tell you this, you tell me that thing. That's inappropriate, and that can backfire on you. You know, anything you say can and will be used against you, okay? In fact, in the Field Operations Manual, the compliance officers are to be looking for what's called affirmative defense circumstances, where an employer may come back and say, you know, here's my affirmative or legitimate defenses to getting out of a citation, and part of their job is to gather information to disprove an affirmative defense. So I tend to be of the mindset that I'm going to be professional, I'm going to be cooperative, I can be friendly, but I am going to remember what I'm there for and what I'm doing, and be careful what I say and careful what I don't say, and be very, words have meaning. I'm going to be very specific, and I'm going to answer what I'm asked, and I'm not going to offer up more information unless I feel it's needed to clarify and give further understanding of a circumstance. Okay. I've been in a lot of inspections in the past 30 years, and I've been in some cases where supervisors get nervous, and when they get nervous, they start talking a lot. Okay. I was in the military, and one of my jobs, I was military police. I was a traffic accident investigator. And when they taught us how to do investigations, one of the techniques they taught us was just to ask a question and pause for a very long period of time, because people are uncomfortable with silence. And all of a sudden they'll start talking because they'll feel the need to fill the silence, fill the voids with talk. And quite often it's amazing what people will start to say when they feel uncomfortable with the silence. So be prepared for that and have some strategy and some control over what you say and why, okay? You also need to consider the benefit of the opportunity to negotiate scope and conditions of the inspection. And so that's important when we determine that we want to consent to an inspection. Conducting the inspection, whether or not you have a warrant or you gave consent, the inspection is going to be conducted. It needs to be at reasonable times during normal working hours, unless they've made arrangements to come. And maybe I've had an inspection on a night shift before, and OSHA did reach out and say, hey, this is at an unusual working time. We want to inspect for this complaint. Where can we meet you and what time? And so we were out there and we met the inspector at that time. But we didn't have a whole lot of advance notice, okay? So again, it's got to be conducted within a reasonable manner. I've had inspections that have lasted a week, and that's reasonable for the type of site that they were inspecting. It was very large, and for the wall-to-wall inspection. So it still needs to be a reasonable scope. At a certain point in time, it begins to interfere with your business operations. I had a client who OSHA showed up and wanted to inspect their warehouse, and went through and asked the supervisor of the warehouse to explain to them how every tool and piece of machinery worked, even though they weren't using them. And that was unreasonable in my opinion, okay? And took an extensive amount of time. You're not there to teach OSHA how you do your job. You're there to go through an inspection, okay? So opening conference, the compliance officer has several duties that they owe to the employer. If they don't adhere to these, we can request for clarification on any point, and you should know these. They should explain why you're being inspected, what type of inspection it is. If it's a complaint, they should produce a copy of the complaint. They should describe what they intend for the scope and duration of the inspection to be. And they should deliver their first request for documents and information at that time. You should be writing down everything. If you need to have somebody and their only job is to write things down, make sure it's somebody who takes good notes and you can read them. I often will have somebody with me during an inspection, and I'll take pictures, but their job is to write everything down that gets said or discussed back and forth, okay? Some of the best practices during an opening conference: you should introduce your inspection team. If the compliance officer doesn't volunteer all the information that they owe you, you should ask, and talk about what's the document production protocol, like how, you want my 300 logs, they're back at my office, how do I get them to you, and what time frame do you need them within? You should ask for any document and information request to be in writing. That's nice if they do that. I don't get too hung up on that, but that could be your protocol. And you give that to your document production manager. So for example, maybe they ask for your 300 and 300A within the last 5 years be provided to them at this fax number within 4 hours of the request. As soon as I received that, I'd give that information to one of my team members, and I would tell them to immediately notify our document production manager. Here's all the things that we've been requested to provide and our time frame and where it needs to go. And again, we start our own file that has a copy of everything we produce to OSHA. We have ourselves. And then we may talk about what's the protocol for employee interviews. Do they want to interview employees as you walk around, or do they want to schedule and arrange interviews in the later part of the day and you call the employees in to participate, okay? Normally it's going to be 3, I've seen 5 years typically of past 300A forms. If you're in general industry, they may ask for a personal protective equipment hazard assessment. If you work in construction but you have a warehouse, you actually have to have this PPE hazard assessment for your warehouse personnel. They typically will fall under general industry there. They might ask for what's your emergency action plan at your office or for your job site. They may ask for your complete safety program, or they may ask for elements of it. So, you know, for example, I'd like to see your HAZCOM program and your lockout tagout program. And they may ask for corresponding training records as well. All legitimate requests. You should arrange for a daily closeout meeting. They may not be done with their inspection at the end of the day. They may be coming back, or they may be done with their field inspection, but they don't want to conduct a closing conference yet because they have to go back to their office and talk to their supervisor. So these are things that should be discussed and should be communicated. You should know exactly where you're at in the inspection process and when your closing conference is going to be conducted. You should also ask about any concerns. You should listen carefully. If a compliance officer is asking questions about something or taking photos of something, you should consider that a concern, okay? There could be some proactive presentations of information you want to present if a compliance officer has a concern, but your safety professional or your team leader should be determining that based on what information you know you have and the pros and cons of that. You'll want to plan the next day's inspections. My experience is OSHA is really good about this. They'll tell us, you know, okay, we'll be back out here at 9 tomorrow, or we'll be back, we're going to take lunch, we'll be back at 12 o'clock, you know, so just be aware of those elements, communicate where to meet and at what time, and give them your phone number in case things change, right? And they want to come back early. Learn about who OSHA wants to interview and schedule those interviews, be cooperative, and same thing for sampling, and be prepared to take your own sampling. During the opening conference, management personnel should be conducting a walkthrough of the facility, okay? Don't waste time. There's nothing wrong with this. It's actually prudent best practice that while I'm conducting an opening conference with the compliance officer, it may take me 30 minutes, it may take me an hour, depending. This is your last chance to walk through your facility with your supervisory personnel doing this, cleaning up things, making sure everybody has what they need and are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and all the employees and contractors know the OSHA's there. These folks should be trained ahead of time so that they're not afraid to participate in an interview. They're aware of what the process entails, so it's less scary, and that, you know, we shouldn't be sending people home or changing activities just because OSHA is there. That, I see that as a variety of dishonesty, okay? But there is nothing wrong with going through and conducting a walkthrough yourself and correcting any hazards. There's nothing that says, oh, well, once OSHA's on your site, you can't fix something before they see it. That's ridiculous, okay?